My name is Jonathan Parks, and welcome to Jonathan's Nature Crafts. I must inform you that I do not live in this house by myself, but live here with other people. Sometimes other members of the household may have to walk through areas where I might be recording with other family members on the phone. If you hear any noise like that, please feel free to disregard. We are doing our best to get noise-canceling equipment, which may at least keep you from hearing exactly what is being said. Thank you for considering. Well, tonight, I just decided I wanted to come out here and carve on the back porch. I'd say it seems pretty sunny tonight. It's not too cloudy at night, and it doesn't look like it's going to rain. Last time I checked the forecast, it wasn't going to, but if it starts to tonight, we might just kind of take everything back in. And do want to also just say that I might get my stuff out here and maybe I'd say sharpen up some big knives out here. And I will say I got this particular set online. These are some bigger knives with some bigger blades, and hadn't really checked the brand, unfortunately, but we'll just kind of say that whenever I kind of carve those Holy Family nativities out of those much harder, tougher woods, I like to use those bigger knives because they, I'd say, can be a little stronger, have some bigger blades, and I think while we're at it, we might just kind of reach things down here and maybe just try to sharpen these knives a little bit. I got this one here to kind of pull out, and it's kind of got a big handle and a big blade, and try to make sure we curve along here. It just kind of try to use the stone to get them sharper. This kind of stone you can get at Walmart is one that I started using in the past year because it's rather cheap. And it's just like how I was talking to Charles Womack on YouTube the other day, or in Facebook Messenger rather, about his comment on my YouTube video about how one day, you know, of course, we don't really know each other personally. We've never seen each other in person, only corresponded by internet because we have kind of like the common wood carving interest, but had our discussion about how one day we might be carving on heaven's front porch, carving tree of life wood. And I'd probably also say, you know, it's like these woods that grow around here. If it comes from a tree that fruit grows on, we call it a fruit wood. We also know that we hear that the tree of life in heaven is going to be just like the tree of life that was in the Garden of Eden. The one that Adam and Eve chose, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, instead of. So, of course, once they knew evil after eating that fruit, the angel had to guard the tree to make sure they didn't eat of it and live forever. But we know heaven has those fruits, and I'd say it's like, since it has a fruit on it that you can eat and have eternal life in heaven, which won't be necessary because eternal life is God's gift to begin with, I'd say that that means that tree of life wood is a fruit wood too. Now I can almost kind of imagine it could very well be that something I read somewhere about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was that it would be the fruit we would eat for the rest of our lives. We just really don't know, out of all the fruit trees we have these days, which remaining fruit tree that is. But could be any of them. Could be the apple tree, the orange tree, the mango tree. Could be any of them. We just don't know. Like, I tell you, when I was a kid, I had this little toy computer that had a little card you put in there to guess the names of things, and one of them was about fruit, and one of the fruits mentioned on there was a mango. That was how I got introduced to that. And one day, Mom, who was my primary Sunday school teacher, she asked us if any of us had any idea what kind of fruit that could have been. She said it could have been an apple, could have been a plum. Gave people ideas. I said it could have been a mango. She said that's true, it could have been that too. And lately, fruits have had to start becoming my snacks. My mom still keeps cookies in the cabinets in there, but thing of it is that I would eat so many of those in one sitting before having my blood tested last time recently, and my sugar got so high I became pre-diabetic, so I had to watch it. And that shows you really how much I thank Charles Womack for all the encouragement he gives me about that, and some of the comments he's made on my YouTube videos, shares that, and really supports me in this particular dieting journey as well as my wood carving journey. And I'd say thing could be true. He even says the same, you know, about spreading the word of the Father. I really like to do that. I tell you, this tool right here, there are certain things it's used for, like maybe digging the bowls out of spoons or things like that, but I don't really make things like that, so wouldn't really have a use for this. Maybe one day I might be making something one day that I will have a use for this to do, but not really there yet. Not right now, at least. There's something here we have that is called a strop, and I'd say it has two different kinds of leather on it. This is kind of like a fuzzy leather, and this is kind of like a shiny leather. I like to use the fuzzy leather first. And when Calvin Grant was alive, he always told me, you know, you don't have to keep using the strop. It's not going to be the best thing. The strop doesn't really sharpen it. The strop just kind of shines the knife, kind of hones it. And I'd say of all things, you know, a lot of places I like to go exercise, a lot of places I like to go out to eat. Sometimes if I have to keep count of how many strikes of the strop or stone I'm giving my knife, have to stop talking to do that. And I've heard that whether it's the stone or the strop, you give it the same number of strikes for each side. So here we come along to the shiny side. And what we forgot to do was to kind of take the shiny side with this knife too, so and I'll tell y'all, like with little things we got here, there's kind of an interesting little piece of leather strop that came with the tool set. It's this little one, but these are like all the basic ones that I used to use when I first started carving. I still have one downstairs somewhere that Calvin Grant donated to me during his lifetime. It was a very old one. It, I'd say, was kind of like a very old piece of leather on top, and I'd say that particular piece of leather, it was kind of thick, kind of rubbery, and probably the kind where if you tried to turn the knife the wrong way, it could actually kind of shave the leather off. So I say that there's going to be little things we'll try to work on this evening for this. And this is an African mahogany piece that is made out to be Mary. So kind of work our way along here. And like I say, you know, sometimes I've learned to kind of take it a little bit slowly sometimes, because that's kind of the best way to make things like this work out so well and good. And I say that sometimes, just sometimes, you know, your hands can get a little bit strong from carving this hard wood, and because of all my autism stuff and things, it's kind of good for me. It's kind of like squeezing a little stress squeezer thing. Saw in a video last night how that just helps so much with anxiety. The fact that you can kind of squeeze one of those things and breathe in and out, and it kind of helps. I remember as a kid growing up seeing a whole lot of those little stress squeezer things, and we know that things were kind of odd in my days, and you know, stuff is kind of bad enough now, but sometimes I'd say, you know, maybe worse now. But in my days growing up, being born in the 80s, raised in the 90s, I'd say things just weren't always the best things back then. There were just a lot of things that Spencer Gifts has always carried, which as kids were things we weren't allowed to have. In fact, we really weren't supposed to be going into that store when we were kids, because there was just a lot of stuff in there that, as my parents would state, it was bad for your mind. So it wasn't a good place considered for us to be. And so I tell you, the things there were not the best things. And even whenever I was a very little kid, I'd tell you, one time I wanted my mom to take me in there when we were at a mall that had that store in it, and she said, no, they don't have things for little kids. I say, it's always like strange little things we have, say, and do. I mean, I'd say whenever I kind of like got up into my teen years, my high school years, I'd go in there and buy those little necklaces that I'd wear to school, and they were like sterling silver necklaces to begin with, but they were plated in gold. Those were something that I'd say the popular thing when I was in school was for boys to wear real gold necklaces around their necks. But I'd kind of get whatever I could find, whatever I saw and liked, and whatever I could afford. There was a time in my life when hadn't really started working much yet, was working, doing odd jobs. Over the summer I was 16, and saying for that time, you know, being paid about $5 an hour for the job I did then, and I say for what I made at that time, kinda could buy one of those for $30. Of course, in those days, you'd have to pay hundreds of dollars for a real gold one, which I'd say after I started working at Pizza Hut and making a whole lot more money, I finally started to do. And it was all just kind of ways we worked. mysteriously in our lives, making the best out of what we had, what we could do, what we could offer. I say that this is kind of like my relaxation for tonight, is getting out on this porch just to kind of carve little things here. Don't know how long I can make this video last. It will depend on how much room I have in my Amazon Photos account, because that is probably the longest way that a video can upload to the account. So I say that we're going to kind of go over here to this other side here and remove this other little triangle. And I'd like to tell you all a little bit more that I find out about the 4th of July, because here in America we celebrate the 4th of July as Independence Day, because that was the day when of course, that War of Independence that George Washington fought against King George to free the United States from England. And when we became a free nation, and on July 4th, 1776, that Declaration of Independence was signed. Oh yeah, and I tell you, never mind that dog back there. He's a real friendly, playful dog, but he loves to play. And you know, when I speak of dogs, there's a certain dog named Fluffy I like to tell you about. She was a little Yorkshire Terrier that belonged to my great-grandmother and great-aunt, who lived down the street here growing up. And there was a Pizza Hut down the street here from my house, in the place where Jimmy John's is now. And I worked there, and you know, in the summer of '98, I was working there on the 4th of July. My parents were over at the church close to Rupp Arena watching the fireworks at the parade downtown, where the church was fairly close to downtown. And my grandmother, of course, my mom's mom, was down the street here because, of course, my grandfather was dead at that time. And so was my great-grandmother on my maternal grandmother's side, but my great-grandmother on my maternal grandfather's side was still alive. She was the mother-in-law of my grandmother, who was down there taking care of her that night. So she came to pick me up from work and took me over to my great-grandmother and great-aunt's house. My great-aunt lived with her all those years, and we were out here watching the fireworks from other people's yards. And thing about Fluffy is, for the kind of dog she was, kind of a funny dog, you petted all her fur down, she would stand right back up and shake it all loose. Fluffy's dead now too, you know. I mean, still have a picture of her, and always bought gifts for the dogs in the family around certain holidays and times of year. And I'd say that thing with Fluffy is, while we were watching the fireworks with my great-grandmother and my great-aunt, who was my grandfather's sister, it was like she was holding Fluffy in her arms, and I was petting right down on her, reaching down, giving her little kisses on the forehead, and she just kept wiggling and wiggling. And my great-aunt says, "You're making her heavy doing that." And my grandmother asked her, "What's he doing?" My great-aunt said, "Oh, loving on her, but he keeps pressing down on her," and something after that, probably the fact that she was just kind of wiggly. But I'd say Fluffy was kind of a fragile dog too. They often say that Yorkies are the types of dogs that have real fragile necks, and that's kind of the reason you had to be careful how you petted her. If you petted on her fur, you couldn't pet her like this. You certainly couldn't do this around her neck, because she was just a more sensitive dog. And as far as my great-aunt was concerned, you were kind of being a little bit too rough on a soft dog when you petted her in ways like that. And especially if around her neck, my great-aunt would always say you were choking her. She'd say, "You have to love her in other places." So that was kind of the way I did in those days. And I say that, the 4th was always something that ever since 1776 we celebrated here in America. And then it was a few years later that on the 4th of July in the same year, 2 of our former presidents died just a few hours apart. This was also, I don't remember what year this was, but this was long before I was born, probably long before anybody who is still alive today was born. But John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died on that day in the same year, and just a few hours apart. So we know it had some little strange effects in our lives, and we know that it's always, like they say, for the spirit of 76. That's always what they call it, because we know 1776 was the year the Declaration was signed. And I know for one thing that different people have different Independence Days. I mean, we just can't forget the Juneteenth, which we just celebrated not too many weeks ago, which was a day on which slavery was completely abolished in the United States. And there's certain races and cultures that consider that to be their Independence Day, so we can't forget about them. We kind of got to remember our friends who that is very true about. I have some friends who that quite applies to, and of all the good things I think Biden has ever done, I'd say making that one of our holidays nationally is probably one of the best things he's done. So I say it's probably just kind of time to end here before this video gets longer than my Amazon Photos account can hold. But I'm going to end it right here. Say that I appreciate you all coming on to watch, keeping up with everything. I say there's just kind of all these things I have to say these days, and all these things I have to share, so I'll have more to say soon. Keep in touch. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you in the next video. Stay tuned.